The Chinese President Xi Jinping just met with the DPRK envoy, Mr. Ray, coming into China. Of course, Mr. Ray, according to international press coverage, was talking about a permanent nuclear policy from DPRK. What exactly would that mean for China?
Well, first of all, this visit by DPRK delegation was designed to implement in routine way to the party-to-party exchange mechanism. For example, after our Chinese counterpart party's 18th conference, we sent a high-level delegation to Pyongyang to brief the 18th party's conference. And this time, this is their turn. They sent a high-level delegation to Beijing for briefing the results of the 7th Congress.
Of the Workers' Party.
Of the Workers' Party. So that is a routine visit. However, on the current situation, the highlight is obviously is that the nuclear issue. And you're right, some international media say Mr. Ri repeat the so-called permanent nuclear policy. That's nothing new since 4 years ago when the young leader took into the office because of the Beijing strategy. However, in the meeting, Xi Jinping also pointed out China's policy on the Korean Peninsula was and is unswerving. The so-called unswerving include 3 points.
All right.
Number 1, denuclearization. And then number 2, no war. And then number 3, no chaos. So from a long time, it is not clear they changed their position. But China has never changed our position as unswerving, consistent.
All right, Mr. Eland, I look at you on the big screen, listen very attentively. What do you make of the latest visit by the DPRK envoy to Beijing, and also the statements coming from both sides, from Pyongyang and Beijing, about this latest visit, coming from the Washington perspective?
Well, I do think that the North Koreans are being provocative because they're taking this opportunity at the time of this visit to China to do this missile test and say that the North Korean nuclear program is permanent. And I think that's a challenge to China. They're saying, hey, we're going to, despite these sanctions, additional sanctions, we're going to keep doing what we're doing, and you know, whether you like it or not. And so I think it's a challenge to China. And I was surprised that the Chinese leader met with the North Korean envoy under those circumstances.
Well, as Mr. Yang just indicated, the circumstances is after every Congress party, or the party Congress rather, the two sides would brief
yes,
one another.
I understand it's a
routine.
It's a routine to do this after a conference, but the North Koreans have been very provocative in doing this missile test, saying the nuclear program is permanent. And I think it's a challenge to China. So I'm surprised that the Chinese leader would see the envoy. Certainly, other people in China would meet with him, but whether the leader needs to meet with him is another story, and I think that's surprising.
Ms. Kim, on the other hand, what can be the reactions coming from all sides, both from South Korea, from the United States, and of course from China and others involving in the six-party talks toward the latest situation? Can Seoul and Washington take actions in order to approach Pyongyang at this moment for further possibility of discussion regarding the Korean Peninsula and the nuclear issue?
Well, right now it's pretty clear, and what's been made clear ever since the Nuclear Security Summit in Washington is that the U.S., Korea, and Japan have all agreed that right now the time is pressure. And the logic behind their unified stance right now for pressure seems to be the logic that in order to have effective diplomacy, there needs to be effective pressure to use as leverage to bring North Korea back to any sort of discussion or dialogue. I want to add a point to what our two colleagues had just mentioned about Ri's visit. And I do agree that this was a chance for the North to again pronounce and to advertise itself as a nuclear weapon state to China and the international community. But in the grand scheme of things, it may be in line with Kim Jong-un's efforts to bring back some sort of normalcy to his state, a state that is centered around the party, particularly after the first party Congress in 36 years, and to normalize relations with other countries. So this may be conjecture, but perhaps against this backdrop, perhaps it was a chance for the North to gauge Beijing's willingness for a summit. Perhaps it was a chance to prepare for July next month, when there are a couple anniversaries marking their relationship. And perhaps it's also a way for the North to ask for Beijing's help in sanctions relief.
There are a lot of possibilities and a lot of different sets of interpretations that we can have given the very limited information that we have at this moment. But Mr. Eland, it seems that what you're suggesting is that this is going to be China's issue. And the question is, it seems that our South Korean panelists are trying to interpret in so many different ways to seek possibilities. The question is whether Washington is going to seek possibilities at all. Is Washington sincere in, let's just say, try to bring the situation back into a kind of normalcy, at least to a certain extent, or Washington is more than willing to take advantage of this and therefore have its strategic plans implemented in Northeast Asia?
Well, I think the United States has become leery of getting sucked into negotiations which seem to reward North Korea's behavior, and if they're seeking some sort of relationship with China on sanctions relief, I wouldn't think that another nuclear test would probably do it. I think China probably does need to put more pressure on North Korea, but of course China is worried about if North Korea collapses, refugees. They're also worried about having a U.S. alliance on their border if South Korea should be unified under the
but my question,
Korea should be unified under a South Korean government. So I think,
Mr.
I think
Eland,
the United States needs to give China some incentive to put pressure on North Korea.
What kind of incentive are you talking about? And may I just say my question once again very directly, that is, what actions and what incentives can be coming from Washington, D.C., rather than just saying, well, China, you are in a very awkward situation right now. Can the United States, in a way, do anything besides this already sanctions that's already agreed by the international community? Can something more constructive can be done at this moment, given it's the end of the Obama administration?
Well, I think we pay much too much attention to North Korea, frankly, and I think Donald Trump, actually, I'm not a supporter of Donald Trump, but I think he does have a point in that we really need to allow the countries of that region to deal more with North Korea. Right now, it's not really a threat to the United States. They may try to get the United States' attention, but I think we're foolish for constantly paying attention too much to North Korea, because it just allows them to act up to get more aid or whatever they want to do. And I think that the United States should give China more incentive to pressure North Korea by withdrawing from some of the alliances or downplaying them. And I think that these alliances are an attempt to contain China, and they're out of date. And I think the United States needs to reassess its alliances in East Asia with both South Korea and Japan and other countries as well.
Mr. Yang, here's the thing. What can China make of the latest situation? May I have you, first of all, related to that, respond to what Mr. Eland just said, that to give China more incentives, quote unquote, but you could also interpret it in more different ways, give China more pressure, quote unquote. That's one thing. And secondly, what does China make of, on the one hand, China has to work very hard in order to correlate all the parties previously involved in six-party talks to once again come back to the negotiation table. enormous amount of preparation for that, of course, dealing with the DPRK. And on the other hand, be aware of a possible advantage taken by the United States of the so-called danger coming from DPRK in implementing its strategic plans in this region. So how can China play this both hands and also make sure, understand the domestic constituencies, taking care of the neighborly relations?
Well, it's a really big, complex question, and the answer is, of course, complex. But in short, China is seeking for an exit strategy for all parties. Now the situation is every party, the six party, all of us fall in the dilemma, fall in deadlock, and that's not what we want. So first thing first is we need to find a way to let all parties exit from the current deadlock so that we can return the right track for the peace and stability and the denuclearization. That should be implemented by the dual track negotiations, say six-party talks and talks on peace treaty or peace regime replacing the armistice.
Very interesting. Mr. Eland, I would like to, and together with Ms. Kim, to take a look at this piece that we compiled together about a sequence of DPRK developing its nuclear program, its missile program. In a way, it could be interesting to you, Mr. Eland, because it challenged your earlier statement about whether the U.S. has been too much involved on the DPRK issue. It probably suggests the other way around. Let's take a look at this. The DPRK has started its mission to master missile launch technologies back in the year 2006. Give some videos now. 2006 test fires a long-range Taepol-2 missile, which the U.S. said failed shortly after takeoff. 2009, Pyongyang launched a three-stage rocket, which the DPRK claimed a success. The U.S. said it fell into the sea. 3 years later, the DPRK tried the same type of missile, but failed again. But the late 2012, its three-stage rocket successfully put a satellite into the orbit. By 2015, Pyongyang announced a successful launch of a submarine-launched missile, but many were skeptical of the claim. And early 2016, DPRK successfully sent a rocket into orbit. And the list could go on as we would understand. So, Mr. Eland, has there been much, rather, lack of presence of the U.S. attention leading to what we are having right now with DPRK's achievements of satellite testing and also of the nuclear tests?
Well, first of all, I think Obama has made an attempt to not respond to these things as much and has been more reluctant to do the talks with North Korea simply because Clinton and Bush did too much on that, and I think they inadvertently caused bad incentives for the North Koreans to keep doing these things. So Obama may not be doing the right thing, but he's reacting to being leery of the North Koreans, what they've done in the past. So I think my own view is that that's the way to continue. But also, I think we have to realize that North Korea may have some security concerns, and I think they do continue this program because the nuclear program and the missile programs, because they're afraid of a U.S. attack. Now, that may be paranoid, but nonetheless, why make a paranoid nation even more paranoid? And they also like to do it because they like to get attention and get more aid when they do these things by misbehaving. And I think inadvertently, over time, over a long period of time, the United States has inadvertently reinforced this type of behavior. And I think we really need to, disengage from some of these things in Asia rather than go all in. In other aspects, of course, the Obama administration has tried to pivot to Asia by increasing the military forces in Asia, and I think that's the wrong way to go. I think we need to let the countries of the region do more to deal with this on their own rather than jumping in all the time.
Ms. Kim, disengaged by the United States, has the U.S. been really quite disengaging over the years when it comes to possibility of coming back again to the negotiation table, given the quite challenging circumstances? What is the views coming from South Korea? What can South Korea, alliance with the U.S. and Japan, really achieve?
Well, currently, as I said before, the position among all three parties right now including South Korea, is on pressure, is on ramping up sanctions to try to change North Korea's behavior and to try to change Kim Jong-un's calculus. Now, on your question of whether the U.S. has been disengaged or not, I'd have to say that currently it's the North that does not want to engage in any sort of discussions with the U.S. Washington has attempted, has extended its hand, has asked for and proposed a discussion and dialogue, but the North is almost obsessed in Washington's view that these discussions can only be premised on discussions on a peace treaty, and that Washington needs to recognize the North as a nuclear weapon state, and Washington will not recognize the North as a nuclear weapon state. So the conditions for talks really is what is the biggest challenge right now.
Of course, the condition for talks has always been the deadlock. The question is, can people put that aside in order to really enter into a deadlock, in order to break the deadlock? That's all we understand over the years. Now, before we go, very briefly from you, Mr. Yang, what can be done now?
Well, all the related parties should increase exchanges and engagements between U.S. DPRK and China DPRK and vice versa. But the key words now is talks. In fact, both DPRK and U.S. want talks, but with quite a different subject. So we should explore our political wisdom to explore a way to bring about all together to talks on the commonly interested subject, basically peace and stability and denuclearization.